Okay, hello everyone, internet land. It is Sylph, Dominic, Hawkins coming to you live on the 23rd? Oh, maybe it's the 22nd. It is the 22nd, had to count up. 22nd of July, 2020. For Wednesday night, it's our meditation and breathing exercises, meditation and Qigong session. And yeah, cool winter days as we slowly make our way out towards the springtime. The breathwork activities, it's still really useful because we've got the kind of crisp, that cold crispness in the air. So we can use that to really heighten just observing the differences, because initially a lot of it's about observing contrasts and differences as I get settled in. And so it's for that, if you go back to the previous videos, that we've got a lot of listening to different focus sections, or smelling certain things. You know, like people have often asked at the dojo, why is the incense burning? Yeah, there's lots of reasons, but one really key one is that it gives you a really specific smell sense, something to orient yourself to, you know, and the candles, something really vivid to orient your vision with, and you kind of establish by doing that with all the five senses, you kind of establish yourself then, you know, at that point in space and time, and then it's easier to contrast from that. So you go, okay, well, I'm listening, so I know what I'm listening at. Now maybe I can hear the sound of cars driving outside, and now I can reference that against a dog barking, which is different from the cars. And you start to build a map. You have to start somewhere. Have somewhere to start with, and somewhere to put reference to. So reference requires 2 points as a minimum. Yeah, if you just have 1 point, you don't really have a reference to anything. So tonight, what I wanted to do, as I said last week, I wanted to move on to focusing on the experience of the breath and the sound of the breath. Then I want to move on, I want to make sure we get tonight to observing the heartbeat. So the actual experience of the rhythm of the heart itself. Whoa, adjusted it too far. Yeah. Oh, there we go. That's much better. Yeah, great. Okay, so people can just join us as we go. We're just going to start off by breathing into the nose, down into the belly, out through the mouth. You have your tongue sitting on the roof of your mouth, behind the top 2 front teeth. Your choice with this, when you breathe in, keep the tongue on the roof of your mouth. When you breathe out, you can either just soften the tongue and breathe out, or you can keep the tongue on the roof of the mouth and breathe out around the outside of the tongue. Hi those who've just joined. So your choice. Either of those is fine. The breathing out through the tongue, around the tongue with it there, you might find, if you're not used to that, it might feel constricting, but you find a solid place in that. So beginning with just the things you can hear, we're going to start off as you breathe in and out, just listening to the sounds that you can hear outside of the space. What can you hear outside of the room that you're in, or the building? What sounds can you hear outside? Sounds of cars, maybe. People walking. Footsteps on the pavement. Now I want you to focus immediately on the sound of your breath. It sounds very close to your body as you breathe in and out. Notice how immediately the sound of your breath is, tripled, quadrupled in volume. Not because you're breathing loudly all of a sudden, but you're observing that. That range is where you've placed your observation. You're not out there. So you're just listening to the sound of your breath, watching the sound of your breath. As you breathe in through your nose, down into your belly. And out through your mouth. And I want you to listen to the sound of your eardrums. What can you hear right at the location, right at the surface of the eardrum itself, as you breathe in and out? Listening to the sound at the eardrum itself. One more breath all the way in through the nose, down into the belly, out through the mouth, listening to the sound of the eardrum. All right, I'm just softening the focus on the audible sense, moving on to the sense of smell. We'll move through these fairly quickly, since you should already know how to do this quite well. So, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose, down into the belly. What can you smell in the space around? We'll just do a couple of breaths for these as you breathe in. What can you smell? What scents, flavors and perfumes are available in the room or the building? Perhaps you're watching this in the future and you're in a park. And there's all kinds of springtime fragrances. Now focusing on smelling the inside of the nose, smelling the receptors, the smell receptors themselves as you breathe in and out. Can you smell the smell receptors of the nose? And just softening your focus on the olfactory sense. Moving on to the sense of taste. So we're going to begin by just tasting as you breathe in and out. You might want to breathe out slowly for this and taste the aromas. And I want you to begin by tasting. What can you taste in the air, in the space around you, as you breathe in and out? Okay, now the next few breaths, what can you taste in the mouth itself? So maybe recent food, dinner, or cups of tea, or a cheeky hot chocolate. As you're breathing in and out, what can you taste now inside the mouth? Just taking your attention to the inside of the mouth. If you need to breathe out through the nose to really focus on the taste, that's fine for this. Don't get too caught down in everything. They're not rules, they're more guidelines. Okay, now as you breathe in and out, I want you to take your attention to the taste of the tongue itself. Tasting the taste buds. Take 2 breaths for this, off you go. Can you taste the tongue? Not the mouth, but the tongue. As you're breathing in and out. One more breath. All right, and just softening the focus on the taste sensation. Moving on to the experience of sight. So you can have your eyes open or closed. Unlike last week, I'll actually walk you through the eyes closed one. So if your eyes are open, just staring into the oblivion, and your interest is in looking out beyond the objects and bringing your peripheral vision into play. If your eyes are closed, staring out beyond the eyelid. So you're not interested in the reflections of the flat light and the geometric shapes, yeah, or the light that shines at the back on the eyelid from the surrounding room. You want to peer through the eye into the darkness, the depth of the eyelid. Just breathing in and out, just vaguing out in your vision, and just seeing what can you see. That's the question. Each of these are just a question. What can you smell? What can you hear? What can you taste? What can you see? Off we go. Breathing in and out. Suddenly I can see so much. The whole room. Well, maybe not. I can't see behind me. The whole rest of the room from here forward. All right, just softening. The next one we're going to do with our eyes closed, all of it. So with the eyes closed, I now want you to look at the inside of the eyelid. So if you've got light shining, you can. That's easy. You can see the lit up inside of the eyelid. There might be shapes or colors or geometric forms that play out right on the surface of the eyelid, as if it's like a screen, a monitor. I want you just to watch and look at the inside of the eyelid. 3 breaths, off we go. In through the nose, down into the belly. Ooh. And keep breathing. Don't get lost off in your thoughts. Remember, you're looking at the inside of the eyelid. And if the shapes are changing, they're just changing shapes. Don't apply meaning to them. Don't run off in your mind with meaning. Just look at the inside of the eyelid. One more breath. All right, and just soften the focus on the sight. We'll move on to the final of the 5 senses that we work with. We're going to observe this tactile sense, the sense of feeling sense, but I want to focus on the weight of the body. So where the body weight meets the ground. So I'm sitting on the ground. I can feel there's areas in my legs, my feet, where my body weight, where it meets the ground, there's a lot of pressure. So I'm just going to begin by breathing in and out and just observing the pressure. Just looking at that mentally from a tactile sensation. What happens to the pressure observation? What happens to the experience of pressure when you look at it for quite a while? Breathing in and out. So just keep in mind, what happened to the experience of pressure as a vague, generalized feeling when you looked at it? Did it change? Did it increase in density? Did it alter? Did it divide into further refined experiences that you wouldn't say are just pressure? They were like, ooh, maybe heavy and other terms like that. So now I want us to take our mind's attention, rather than to the experience of pressure, I'm going to take it to the tissue, the actual tingling of the tissue. So we do this a lot when we look at the fingers, yeah? When we think about the thumb, the fingers, and immediately you start to feel tingling and tingling sensations, yeah? And throbbing and pulsing in the tissue of the fingers and the digits. Do the same thing, but do that to wherever it is that you are feeling the pressure, and practice isolating from the pressure, separating, the pressure and this tissue sensation. So we'll take a few, maybe 3 or 4 breaths for this one. So wherever you feel the pressure of the body meeting the ground, your body weight meeting the ground, I want you to hone in on some tissue there. Doesn't matter what it is, but I want you to make it about, the size of a 5-cent piece in your, maybe even smaller, in your honed in focus. Off we go. And already it might be increasing in feedback. Continue breathing. It's normal to get little ripples up your spine and little shivers. That's all good. All right. And now just relaxing your focus. So we've just walked our way through. I'll check the time. Ooh, 20 minutes past. So now what we're going to do is we're going to shift our focus to the experience of the breathing as an activity. So the sound of the breath, the tactile relationship, the feedback of the body as you breathe. So the way that the chest changes and the abdomen fills and releases. The stretching of the diaphragm, the stretching the muscles in the back and the kidney, and the opening up of the ribs and the sinew. I want you to really focus on that. So we're going to look at across all the 5 senses, can we find an attribute in all of those, a quality in all of those that's about the breathing that we're going to be doing. So even down to internally observing the tactile sense of the breath as you breathe in and out, so the air passing in and out of the body. Maybe it touches, or is obviously touching flesh and skin on the inside of the nose and down the throat. And is there a smell to that experience? Is there a taste to that experience on the in and the outward breath? Yeah. So we're going to look for those experiences in breathing. If you just start off breathing, we're going to keep the breathing in through the nose, down into the belly and out through the mouth. I want you to fill up the belly first. Then fill up the chest. And then deflate the chest first, and then contract the diaphragm and empty the diaphragm last. And then the inward breath. So this is not a great natural breath. A great natural breath would be work on the inhalation, no work on the exhalation. This is work on the inhalation, contraction, and work on the exhalation. Work on the inhalation, work on the exhalation. So this isn't the natural breath, yeah? This is the difference. This is a forced breath, which we're going to do for a little while to contrast. So breathing in, really feel the diaphragm. And feel it till you feel the stretching of sinew and muscle and the tissue. Let it rise up into the chest. Let it kind of shake out and tension build up in the shoulders, and then let the chest relax. And then breathe out, engage the diaphragm and breathe right out. And then in. Stretching the body and then out. Chest first, diaphragm last. Squeeze the diaphragm. And then in. And then out. And remember, you're listening to the sound of the breath, experiencing the feeling sense of the breath, smelling the air on the breath, tasting the air on the breath. Pardon me. Let's need more oxygen. Continue breathing. And breathing in. Now hold the breath. So there's no more sound of breathing, or smell or taste of breathing. There's no more tactile relationship of breathing. What else do you discover in the silence? Sound. Suddenly I can hear rain on the roof. I can feel my heart beating. There's a pulsing in my neck. There's a soft pulsing. And breathing out. So don't choke yourself red in the face doing this activity. Just hold the breath long enough that you're able to get a couple of seconds, or however long you want, of the how incredibly loud and brought to the forefront these other experiences are. And then just return to the breath. Yeah? Do a full normal breath cycle before doing it again. So in and out. And then in again. And then hold the breath. And notice how everything else comes to the forefront. Can you feel your heart beating inside the chest cavity? And relaxing your breath. We're going to do this again, a full breath cycle. And out. So we're going to breathe in again and hold. Holding. And just experiencing your heart beating inside your chest cavity. And relaxing the breath and breathing, full breath cycle again. We'll do it one more time. So breathing in, holding the breath, so hopefully you can get to the point where you're able to hold the breath at that peak, and maybe it takes 1 or 2 moments, but the heartbeat and the rhythm of the heartbeat suddenly becomes really pronounced. And if you keep doing this, it really feels like, focusing on the heartbeat, it feels like your heart is pounding massively, throwing your body from side to side. And if you have your eyes closed and you spend 20 minutes, half hour looking at the heartbeat under these kinds of experiences, it feels like you're being thrown about like this. Thrown, beaten from side to side, and you open your eyes and you realize you're completely still. And the people over there at the bus stop are looking at you strangely. But it really feels like you're being tossed around and really thrown. And these are interesting experiences, yeah? This where the inside world meets the outside world. In terms of our ability to explore of the 5 senses, the 5 senses as they relate inside the body cavity as opposed to outside the body cavity. Different experiences. So we're going to do this one more time. We're going to do this full breath cycle, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And now as we breathe in again, we're going to hold. So breathing in, holding the breath, watching the heartbeat. and relaxing the breath. So, another full breath cycle. If that was a long hold for you, full breath cycle. And just relax. So hopefully that last set, I think I gave you about 30 or 40 seconds. You should have really been able to feel your heart beating and pulsing. And, if you've ever wondered, am I alive? There's a way of answering that question. Sit down and feel the actual beating of your heart. It's hard to get closer to the basic human physiology than that. Okay, so a lot of what we've been doing over the last, I think this is session like 14 or something. Wow. All of these sessions has been this type of meditation around almost like a type of vipassana, the observation, meditation of observation. And we've been doing sense observation meditation. So we've been observing the five senses and feedback of the five senses, both externally and internally, and at different layered focus views. So you can take this further. It doesn't have to be just the five senses. So if we were to get into Zen specifically, which just means the meditative state, I talked about this before, where Zen is the Japanese term for a Chinese word Chen. Chen is a Chinese slang for the term Chana. Chana is a Chinese term for an Indian, like a Hindi, term dhyana. And dhyana is the meditative state. So there's standing dhyana, sitting dhyana, lying down dhyana, working dhyana, motorbike riding dhyana, martial art dhyana, plumbing dhyana, cake making dhyana, etc., etc., etc. There's no prerequisite for the meditative state other than the experience of the meditation. The meditation just meaning the observation, the application of the mental focus. So really it's sort of engaging the human tool. I only say that human because I can't speak for the other animals, but engaging the human tool of mental monofocus, where you're able to really listen, and that's all that your primary consciousness is doing at that point in time, just listening. And it's incredible details that come forward, like unbelievable. But if you half listen and half think about yesterday, well then half the details come forward, And if you just 1% listen and 99% worry about all that terrible thing that happened or blah blah blah, well then you only get 1% of the available information. And so don't expect that to really answer your key questions about life, the universe, and everything. So with Zen, meaning the meditative state, Zen can be found anywhere. You don't have to sit in a temple. And it's lovely. You don't have to go and sit in a temple on top of a mountain in order to experience Zen. That's a really great training place, that might be a wonderful way to begin that. It's not necessary, but it's beautiful, that you can sit in an office building and do that. It's not very enjoyable, but that enjoyability isn't the purpose of meditation. And I think again, this is something where modern Western society is kind of taken this weird path with this, where meditation has become, something that you do for enjoyment, or instead of watching a movie, meditate. Instead of playing video games, meditate. It's like it's put in as another fun activity, whereas it's actually quite a hardcore scientific method of self-observation, where the questions that you ask can be answered by observing the reality that you're experiencing, whether the questions are about the fundamental makeups of the reality, or whether they're about character and personality, motivations, personal motivations, actual feelings. If you're interested in how you feel about something, but it's hard to really narrow down, sit down and focus on, in a sense of Zen, in a sense of meditation, focus on that topic for an hour, and there's a high likelihood that you won't be confused anymore about what it is that you feel around that and all of the makeup. Yeah. So meditation isn't necessarily about enjoying, because sometimes in your observation, you're not experiencing enjoyment. And so what you'll observe are all of the things that you've decided are unenjoyable, not enjoyable. So if you're walking past, like if you live next to a construction yard and at 6 a.m. they wake you up with like drilling, that's really that's not enjoyable. If you really wanted to, you could sit in bed and you could listen, focus intently on the sound of the jackhammers going on next door. And they would change. Not the sound, but your experience of that would change. And I can't say in what way, but it would alter. And the meaning that you apply to those sounds would change. And you would find that whereas the narrative maybe used to say, oh, the jackhammers really, they really rile me up, that doesn't necessarily have to be true. And you could find that there's a difference and a separation between the jackhammers and your emotional experience. And that one doesn't necessarily just cause the other in like a direct causation. So Zen, there's lots of different types of Zen. I talk about Zazen quite often. So Zazen is usually simplified down to just sitting Zen. Yeah. And it's kind of like it takes the focus, it takes the name on of a lot of how it is that we do our meditation, because often we're seated. We're not often lying in bed. In class, we're not often lying down or standing. You can do standing Zen. I don't know the Japanese term for standing Zen off the top of my head. Just gotta look that up. So whatever it is that you're doing, however it is you find yourself, you can be focusing on things. The sense observation is primarily on physical senses. Zen doesn't have to be located in that. It can be on abstract concepts like identity and your name. So as an interesting one, just to play this out tonight, I'll check the time. Okay, we've still got time. We're going to look at your name. So this is a bit of fun. This activity was shown to me a long time ago, one of my teachers. So as we breathe in and out, in through the nose, down into the belly, and out through the mouth. Now there's a fine line between meditation and visualization in these, because they become abstract. The purpose of this is not to produce an environment that will imaginarily produce an environment that will give feedback to the five senses. The purpose of this is to focus on, as if having a question, on one very bland, basic, monotoned concept. And it doesn't flesh out into smells and sounds and tastes and touch. It becomes an academic, like a logical thinking experience. So as you're breathing in and out, in through the nose, down into the belly, and out through the mouth, you just take 4 breaths to settle back into the room that you never left, the sounds that were always going on around you, the smells that have lingered in the room for this whole time. And that feeling in your body where it meets the ground, that pulsating pressure. Now I'd like you to, with your eyes closed, project in your imagination, onto the back of your eyelids, imaginarily, your name in letters, in whatever shape and order and colour it is that you want. But I want you to project your name, and that's what you're going to focus on, your name. And I just want you to be thinking about your name. Just your first name for now. And that's going to be the practice. We're just going to apply our Zen, our meditative state, out of interest in what happens when I just think about my name really intensely. Considering my name, saying it repeatedly over and over and over again in my head. Seeing it in my imagination on the back of my eyelids. Notice how, as you go through that process, certain abstract concepts get pulled in. Maybe there's some memories, or you discover a certain way that you feel about your name, or a sudden memory of someone calling you your name, or the way you perceive it when you see it written instead of heard, or a certain letter that you think is a bit funny, or it's a silent letter and it doesn't appear, and so all these different ways, these different ideas and thoughts that come up when you just think about your name. And just let them just kind of waft around. Don't focus on those. Your interest is on your name. Focus on your name. As you breathe in and out, keep breathing. And just relax the thoughts. It's like, oh, interesting experience. Effectively, the question that we asked was, what is my name? So I say, what is Sylph, or what is Dominic? It's an interesting question. We're going to do another one, another kind of abstract idea. We're going to ask the question, what is red? So we're breathing in and out in through the nose, down to the belly. I want you just to project onto the back of the eyelids in your imagination the colour red, just a vivid colour red. I just want you to think about the colour red and just think red. And the question is, for your mind's tool, the question is, what is red? What is red? Like on a fundamental level, what is red? We'll just do this for a couple of breaths, maybe 10 breaths. Off we go. Thinking about red. and just relaxing your focus. Check the time. So, in a way, it's just asking questions. Whatever it is that you focus on is the subject matter. It's the topic of the question. And you'll find that there's some questions that don't interest you, and there's some questions that interest you greatly. And as you find aspects of personal experience that just don't seem to add up, or you have got, there's sort of mismatches in your understanding of something, or you've got certain memories around certain topics, but a whole bunch of topics you can't quite penetrate with your mind, with your memory. Those are the questions. You just bring them up as questions. You're like, okay, well, I'm just going to think about that time. So that maybe there's like some vague memories I have of being 6 at a theme park, and I've got like a few flash memories. I think, okay, well, I'm just gonna focus on that time. And the question is, this is where you find this in some of the writings in Zen. They're given in metaphors, but effectively what they mean is like, the questions aren't questions that are asked by words. So the very topic of observation, of thought, that's the question. That is the question. The question is kind of like, I don't even know if we have a word in English, but what is that is quite close. And it doesn't mean what is it in terms of the form. It means what is it beyond everything that I currently now know. What is love? And you just ponder that. The meditations allow you to do that. Or maybe it's something like, I feel great nervous, I feel great anxiety. You just go, okay, what is anxiety? The question is just the experience of anxiety. So you settle yourself in, and this is where you have to be careful. You want to make sure that you want to make sure you've got enough time and space to be able to actually like go through the process of question and answer. Otherwise, you just kind of work yourself into a mess and then have to go to work. So you might settle in being like, okay, the experience of love, this feeling that maybe you can conjure through memories, or you'll find that there's certain triggers that you've put away in your mind, anchors and snapshots that re-evoke the experience of what you've decided is love. Well, just re-evoke those and then dwell on that feeling in your mental capacity and use that as the question. And then you're just interested, what happens if you dwell there? A lot of the basis of this stands on the comment that the only things that can be destroyed are illusions. So what you will find, and it's the brilliant irony of work like this, is that every single thing that you can put your hand on, you can destroy. Everything that you can grasp, you can destroy. And even figuratively, everything that you can comprehend, you can just disintegrate in your mind. And so the process itself is almost one large question which has one large answer. And it's like, there isn't reality in the way that I have come to believe. And it's at that point where that's just one layer of that answer to that question. That question needs to be taken out further and into context, because it's like, that might be true, but that doesn't invalidate the experiences that I'm having. It doesn't invalidate the sense of self that is apparent to me. It doesn't invalidate the density of this table and the wood that makes it up. The fact that I can cognitize my way to I can't find an ended answer for it doesn't disintegrate it as an experience. And so you have to make this distinction. Some people get to this point where they for whatever reason, maybe it's like through sudden moments of experience, or through drugs and alcohol, which is like personally such a slippery slope, because a lot of people get involved in drugs and alcohol out of interest for these greater personal experiences, and then what happens is they kind of become hooked on the usage of that as the tool to further ask those questions and experience those answers. Whereas it itself becomes the fetter of like a greater tool. It becomes itself another act of bondage to that tool. And I think I remember thinking a long time ago, I was like, oh, it's not even worth it. I'm just gonna really do the work to practice and hone my mind and my mental skills to be able to evoke those experiences and dwell in and out of those states. And I'm really grateful that was the path that I chose to wander down. So it's like sometimes people in whatever path, whatever method, they find their way to those kinds of concepts where they've discovered they can't finish the answer for anything. They sit down and they be like, okay, what is love? They go through that. They might spend 10 years going through that, and there isn't an answer. Damn. Okay, what is this table? And the table takes on abstract concepts and material ideologies and practical physicality, and then even then you kind of dissolves and diverges further into warped ideas and matter, and again you're not left at the end of that process with anything that conceptually resembles a table. And so some people get to there without being particularly educated in terms of the meditative process, and then they make the incorrect assumption that therefore nothing is real and nothing has value. This idea that like, the material realm, it's not real, so therefore it's not as valuable as the spiritual realm. You're like, well, those two ideas of a material realm and a spiritual realm, someone made up. Those are made up ideas. Someone coined that at some point in time. Who knows? Yeah. But someone came up with those terms, and then they were propagated through society, and now they take on as like facts. Oh, it's so materialistic. You're like, what does that mean? I can't experience anything outside of the interaction of the 5 practical senses. And then it builds its experience, and I can turn them outward and inward. And then I can focus on abstract concepts and abstract ideas, but they tend to be informed. Yeah, my internal thinking tends to be informed by the input of my senses. So it's like, though it's elusive, and it's so easy to fall into those traps. The idea that that these things that we've made up as methods and I don't even know what the right word is, maybe just vehicles of understanding, are just human invented vehicles. They don't exist, like in the way that mathematics doesn't exist. That's not a thing. There's not a place in the universe where there's floating numbers of 2s and divided signs and square root signs. That's not a thing. And the universe doesn't think. It doesn't play out the structure in mathematics. That's a human invented idea so that we can put symbols to repeating patterns and methods and processes that we find in the world around us when we look. Mathematics doesn't exist. Some of the things that it's describing are experiences, effects of rhythm and process that are in existence. But mathematics isn't a thing that's made up. Doesn't make it invalid. It works excellently for determining outcomes and patterns that are repeatable. Yeah, that's great. So we're just going to go and like completely vaporize and burn mathematics books and cease teaching that as a method because we've discovered that it's not real. You're like, oh, well, of course not. It's useful. Doesn't have to be, knock on wood in order to be useful. So it's this very tricky line, and coming at it from these angles through meditation, I hope, I still believe, can be useful because it's a much slower way of arriving at those answers. And in the slowness, you kind of gather a little bit more wisdom, and you find that then when you do suddenly cotton onto realizations that you can't grab anything. Nothing you can get lasts, you know. Sometimes people can get into that. So say, for example, if you think about you or name or human or life, one of the things that comes up inevitably is the opposite of that. So if it's like, if you spend enough time thinking about you, one of the things that flicks into your consciousness is not you. So it's other, self and other. And that's the purpose of the head mind, is to divide the line between, contrast the line between black and white. So self and other, up and down, yeah, left and right, left and right, other way. So sometimes people can get into that, and they can get quite far along this. And then this idea, this sudden realization that like, they can imagine the world without them. They can imagine the world where they're not in it. They can imagine experiences where they have died. Okay, so it's like, well, what would life be like? Some people can get very sad, very depressed around that. And you're like, well, it's probably just because they've kind of happened upon that without going further to the point where there'd be more realizations of like, oh, well, even though there is endedness for this experience, the very fact that I can't find the end of anything else suggests that I probably can't find the end of my experience. Death isn't the end of that experience. I mean, the very idea that I can imagine beyond the experience of the world where I'm placed in it as a character is fascinating. That's really fascinating. And again, if you get into dialogue around like, oh, this is the material, this is the spiritual, you're just harping down another. It's very useful. That's a useful tool, but it's not. That's not fact. Yeah, that's not true. There isn't true. There's just more. Yeah. So nothing ever. There isn't endedness. There's just moreness. And one of the things that this type of meditation is great for at doing is being able to just lead us to those experiences where we're like, wow. It's one thing to just kind of consider that I can't find the end of anything. It's another thing to really actually experience. I can't find the end of something. Like even on a simple level. So if I think about where the clothing meets my body, this, you know, even the fact that I identify my body as if like the dust and the carbon that make up the skin, I have some sense of ownership over in relationship to the carbon and the dust that's in the clothing, you know. So find the exact layer where they differ. And the more you look, you'll find that it just microscopes in, and the more you look, the more it microscopes, the more you look, it's not there. That the more you look, you just find this blurring line. You don't find edges and clear boundaries. And it's a good thing. You know, it's quite an enjoyable thing. It's like, oh, well, that's really good, because one of the things it means is that I can change and grow. I can alter. If one of the things that means is if there's patterns in my life that are just like mind-numbingly, tediously repeating, you know, that doesn't have to be the case. If I can't find the end of things and everything kind of blurs, I can just kind of blur it. I can imagine myself in a different experience. I can if this isn't real, you know, if this isn't true, it's not like, well, yes, written on a stone slab, delivered by lightning strike was the name Dominic. It's like, well, if that's not true, then it's kind of open to interpretation. You know, that's great news. That means that I can alter and shift the narrative around myself, and probably alter and shift my experience, you know, feedback from the world. So I think that we'll leave it there, bang on 9 o'clock. I hope that this has been fun. We're going to slowly step now over the next few sessions towards more and more Zen practice, and I'll explain it more. And it's very simple. Let's try to demystify this. If you are finding that you're enjoying the experiences you're having, then that's all you need to do. So if you're thinking like, oh, but how do I take it further? What do I do more? You know, that experience of my heart beating, that was cool. I want that more. There isn't there isn't like, okay, well now you can move up to intermediate level 17 and it's a whole new set of skills. Just meditate more. Just meditate more on the experience of your heart beating. And that in itself will be, that's the rewarding experience. I'll leave you with that. Have fun. I hope that you've had a really good Wednesday night and you have a good rest of the week. I'll see you on Friday night for the Hoshinden Philosophy and Theory talk. And I messaged Jeff Smith, attempting to con him into a Zoom interview with me. So I'll see if I can get that done in the next week. Speak to you on Friday. Bye.